All right, hello. Today we are on lesson 10C in Unit 3, but we are going to start in our interactive notebooks because we have a little bit of vocabulary to write in before we start this lesson. So we've already written about the commutative, associative, and distributive properties. Now on to the properties you're going to use the most, and that's the properties of equality. So we've got an awful lot written here. I'm going to put it all on the screen so that you have some time to write it down while I talk. You don't have to pause the screen. I'm going to keep this on for a little bit. So number 4 property is the properties of equality. Whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other for expressions to remain equal. So I want you to try your best to draw this little balance beam here. The properties of equality, I'm going to underline, properties of equality keep everything equal. Don't mind that bell. So it keeps everything equal. So the addition property of equality says I can add the same thing to both sides and it comes out balanced. It'll still be the same. I could subtract the same thing from both sides and it still comes out equal. If I multiply the same things on both sides, it comes out equal. Or if I divide by the same thing on both sides, it comes out equal. So I like to see it as a balance beam where the equal sign is the middle of this. So this is the equal sign. So you'll see today we're going to be drawing a line down from the equal sign. That's like this balance line. So we have to keep the left side balanced with the right. All right, at this point, if you don't have all of this written down, go ahead and hit pause so you can copy it down. All right, so on to the next word. The only other word that I want you to write, just because we can't fit it on the other page, is inverse operations. So inverse operations, inverse means the opposite. So opposite operations. If you remember, the additive inverse was the opposite of a number. So inverse operations means opposite operations. The opposite of adding is subtracting because it'll make it equal 0. The opposite of subtracting is adding, again, to equal 0. So adding and subtracting, our goal is to make it equal 0. Otherwise, multiplying and dividing are opposites of each other, and that's to equal 1. So the opposite of multiplying by 4 would be dividing by 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1. The opposite of dividing is multiply. So if I divided by 5, I would then multiply by 5, and that's to equal 1. So these are our inverse operations that we're going to be using today. Again, if you need to, go ahead and pause the video for a second so you can write that down. Otherwise, I'm switching over to lesson 10C. All right, so on to lesson 10C. Here's our objectives for today. Students will be able to solve one-step equations using addition or subtraction. Language objectives, students will be able to translate equations from word phrases, and students will be able to identify properties when using or when solving equations. This is important for science problems involving forces acting upon an object. So that's where we're going to see it show up in science. All right, again, we see a lot of the stuff we just wrote down in our interactive notebook. Inverse property of addition, inverse property of multiplication. So basically, if we add, then we can add in the opposite and it'll equal 0. The inverse property of multiplication, if we start by multiplying, then dividing by that same thing will equal 1. All right, the addition property of equality that we just wrote down is when you add the same number to both sides of an equation. Subtraction property of equality is when you subtract. The multiplication property of equality is when you multiply the same side or same thing on both sides, and the division property of equality is when you divide the same thing by both sides. All right, rules for transforming equations. The goal is to get the variable on one side by itself. By itself is also referred to as isolate. So we're going to isolate the variable. So we want the letter, the x, the y, whatever it is, to be on one side by itself so that we can see what it equals. Always perform the same operation to both sides of the equation, and to undo an operation, perform its inverse operation to both sides of the equation. So remember, like we just wrote down in interactive notebooks, adding is the inverse of subtracting, subtracting is the inverse of adding. Multiplying is the inverse of dividing, dividing is the inverse of multiplying. So these are the two that are connected. Over onto the next page, I want you to write out the steps you're going to use to solve all equations. And I'm going to make you write this again in 8th grade, so you might as well write it now. Figure it out now. Again, don't mind that bell. Number 1, the first thing you're going to do with all this is draw a line. So I'm going to be saying draw the line. Draw a line down from the equal sign so that you can separate the two sides. There's a left side and a right side of this equal sign. Number 2, you're going to circle the variable. Circle the variable to see where it is. Because believe it or not, sometimes students miss this because they don't see where the variable is. And then step 3, finally, you're going to do the opposite of what was done. So that's that inverse operation. Do the opposite. So our little steps are draw the line, circle the variable, do the opposite. All right, so let's just try that. That's all we're doing today. It's actually pretty simple. So number 1, again, our first step is draw the line. So I'm going to find this equal sign and I'm going to draw a line down from it. What that does for me is I can visually now see there's a left side and a right side to this equation. I want the variable to be completely by itself, so I'm going to circle it. So we draw the line, we circle the variable. This variable is a y, and I want this y to be completely alone on this side. When we circle the variable, we can see what's around it, and so we can see what to get rid of. So next to this variable, I see that they're subtracting 8. So whatever they started with, they subtracted 8, and they ended up at negative 26. Well, we could guess and check this here, but it's easier if we just do the math. It actually works out to be faster. So if they subtracted 8 to move backwards, I'll add it back in. So we're going to add 8 to both sides, because whatever you do to one side, you've got to do to the other so that it comes out equal. See how this almost looks like that balance beam that you drew in the interactive notebooks? Whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other so that it comes out balanced, so that it comes out still equal. All right, now we write what we have left. Negative 8 plus 8, or 8 minus 8 equals 0. Since that's a 0, it's going to cancel out. I'm not going to write y plus 0 down here when I bring down what I have left. I'm just going to bring down the y. And I'm going to bring down the equals. So on this side, I crossed out the 8 and the minus 8 because they equaled 0. They go away. That's what I wanted to have happen. I want to move that 8 to the other side. So now all I have left on the left-hand side is a y. I'm going to bring down my equal sign, and then I bring down the answer right here, and that's what this side work is for. So I'm going to write out negative 26 plus 8. But I look at, what do I have more of? Do I have more negative or more positive? Well, here we have more negative. So I know my answer is going to be a negative number. I just have to figure out what that is. So to figure out how many more I have, we subtract. 26, take away 8. I can't take 8 away from 6, so I borrow. 16 minus 8 is 8. 1 minus nothing is 1. And so I see I would get negative 18. Now I'm saying that's what y is equal to. I'm going to put a box around my answer. If that's what I'm saying y is equal to, that means I could take out this y and replace it with negative 18 to make this equation true. So that's the check work right here. I'm going to take out the y, and instead of y, I'm going to write negative 18. I'm going to write my answer. Then I'm going to complete this. Minus 8 equals negative 26. That's what we're going to check. Remember, minus means add the opposite. Negative 18 plus negative 18, negative 18 plus negative 8 is all negative, so I'll write the negative sign. And since they're both negative, I add them together. 18 plus 8. 8 and 8 is 16, carry the 1. 1 and 1 is 2. So I would get negative 26, bring down the equals, and bring down the negative 26. Now we check. Is this true? Does negative 26 equal negative 26? Yes. So we know our answer is correct, so we'll never get anything wrong. Isn't that awesome? That's great. Yay, we love getting things right. So I replaced the y with my answer to check to make sure I was right, so I know this answer is correct. All right, let's try that again. We're going to move a little bit faster through it now. Remember our steps. Draw the line, circle the variable. What's next to the variable is a plus 17. The opposite of plus 17 is minus 17. We have to do that on both sides. Plus 17 minus 17 cancels out to 0. So all I have left to bring down is a W. I'm going to bring down the equal sign, and then I see what I have. I have -4 minus 17. These are both negative, so my answer is going to be negative, and since they're going to combine together, that means I add those numbers together. 7 and 4 is 11, carry the 1. 1 and 1 is 2. So that means I get W equals -21. And that's my answer because that's what we figured out the W is equal to. Now we check. Let's see. If W is -21, that means we should be able to say -21 plus 17 equals -4. Okay, let's think about that. Do I have more negative or more positive? I have more negative, so my answer is going to be negative. To figure out how many more, we subtract. 21 minus 17. I'm going to have to borrow, and 11 minus 7 is 4. So on this side, I would get -4, and on this side, I have -4. Does that come out balanced? Yes. So that tells me that missing number W was -21. All right, let's try it again. Number 3. This is all we're doing today, so let's just get some practice. We're going to draw the line. Circle the variable. So here the variable is x. I'm going to look over here and see what do I have to do to get rid of a -18. Well, the opposite of -18 is a +18, a +18. That's what would make that equal 0. So I'm going to add 18 to both sides, +18. Here it cancels out to 0, which is what we wanted to have happen, and I just am left with x equals, and then we check to see what we have. I have some positives and some negatives. I have more positives than negatives, so I know my answer will be positive. And to find out how many more, we subtract. 18, take away 5. 8 minus 5 is 3, bring down the 1, and so I see I would have positive 13. All right, let's check. Let's make sure we're right. That means -18 plus, we're saying x is 13, should equal -5. Do I have more negative or more positive? Well, I have more negative. How many more do I have? I can do that one in my head. I have 5 more. Does -5 equal -5? Yes. Yay, it came out balanced. Our answer, oops, that one wasn't it. Our answer of 13 is correct. Number 4, draw the line. Circle the variable. It's over here this time. To get rid of what's next to it, it says plus -9. Well, that's a -9 that I want to get rid of. Even though there's a plus there, what I really want to focus on is getting rid of a -9. To get -9 to 0, I'm going to have to add 9. And whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. That will make this equal 0, which is what we wanted. So n can just equal this answer. Now this time I don't have to do a whole lot of side work because I can do that addition right here. 21 plus 9 is going to give me 30. So I'm going to say n should be equal to 30. Let's check it. So instead of n, I'll fill in 30 plus -9 should equal 21. Do I have more positive or more negative? Well, this time I have more positive. How many more do I have? We subtract and we get 21. 21 is balanced with 21, and so we know our answer is correct. All right, let's look at one more on this page. I think there's some on the back too. We're going to draw the line, circle our variable, and what do we need to get rid of to get this variable by itself? Well, this time we see the variables on the right-hand side, but that's okay. We can still work this out. They added 22 to it. The opposite of adding 22, subtracting 22. Whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other. This will equal 0, which is what we wanted. I'm going to bring down the D on the side that it's on. I'm going to write down the equal sign. 15 minus 22. Well, do I have more positive or more negative? I have more negative this time, so I'm going to write negative. Since I had more negatives, I'm going to write that number first. 22 minus 15. I have to borrow, and 12 minus 5 is 7. So that tells me I get -7 is equal to D. And as long as the variable is by itself on one side, I know it's isolated. That's my answer. We check. and 15 equals negative 7 plus 22.